I harvested a lot of green tomatoes from the garden and I'm going to use them to make green tomato salsa. This is a very simple recipe and a great way to preserve your garden tomatoes. I'm going to start by cutting them all in half and removing the core, and I'm planning to can this, but you can make them just to eat fresh if you're not using as many tomatoes as I am, but because I want to preserve some of them, I'm going to do a water bath canning method, which is very simple, and I'll walk you guys through the video while I'm making this. But now, the reason why I'm putting these tomatoes in the tray is because I like to roast them. So I'm going to get them a very nice char, as you would do for roasted tomatillo salsa, and then peel it. The original recipe only calls for peeled green tomatoes, and this is my preferred method to peel them. I prefer to do that than throwing them in boiling water, which is a more traditional method. And now I'm going to roast these on broil for about 10 to 15 minutes or until the skins get charred. Meanwhile, I'm going to start working on my onions. The recipe that I'm using actually calls for red onion, but I'm using white onions here because that's what I had at home. This is one of the only things that I feel comfortable modifying into a canning recipe, just the kind of onion that should be fine, but I'm still using the same amount to make sure that I don't mess up the ratios and the proportions, which are very important when canning. And this is also a tested recipes from the Bog Canning book. They have it available online, so I'm going to make sure to link that up in the description box down below as well. So I'm just chopping all of the ingredients to a fine dice. I'm almost done here with my onions, and then I'm going to move on to the peppers. We are going to seed and finally dice those, so just making sure to remove all of the seeds first, and then I will cut them very small so you don't get any big pepper chunks in there. I'm only adding one habanero here to add some heat to it, not too much. And after I dice these very finely, I'm going to start working on the garlic. We only need 2 cloves of garlic for this recipe. Going to just dice it very finely, and then we're going to rough chop the cilantro next. But this time our tomatoes are ready and I'm going to peel them all. It is easier to peel while they're hot, and then I'm going to chop them all up and just mix it all in a pot together with all of the other ingredients we have already prepared. We'll bring this to a boil, then add in the dry seasonings and the lime juice. I used cumin, oregano, salt, and pepper here. Then we stir in the cilantro, reduce to a simmer, and let it cook for 5 minutes. Now we're going to start the water bath canning process. I already have everything prepared in here. I'm going to start filling my sterilized jars, and by this time the water in the canner is almost coming to a boil too. The canner is just a really big pot that will be able to get these jars submerged on it. And I actually like to start this process before I start dicing the veggies. So by the time that I'm ready with the food, the water is going to be coming up almost to a boil also. So I'm just finishing filling up the jars here. And the next step would be remove the air bubbles. I have this little tool that came in a canning tool that I bought, but a butter knife would work just fine. And then after this, you would wipe the rims and place the lids on top, which I forgot to do in this video. I went straight to placing on the lids, but all of them seal at the end, which is good. But if they haven't sealed, I'll have to wipe it and process them again. Everything worked. I was fine this time, but it's a great practice for you to always wipe the rim before placing the lids and the bands on it. The bands I only like to do finger tight, not too tight in there, but just a little resistance in your fingers should be okay. The next step would be to process them, to put them in the boiling water. If the water is not boiling yet, you can still place them in and it will just start counting the timer when it does come up to a boil. But I was pretty close when I was there. I just waited a few more minutes, and as soon as I noticed that everything was boiled, I placed the lid and I started the timer. And while I was waiting, I decided to just fix a quick dinner with the leftovers. Now it's been 20 minutes is the time this recipe has to process for, and after that you're supposed to open the lid and let it rest for 5 minutes, and then I would remove them from the pot like I am doing right now. When you're removing them from the pot, be very careful. You're supposed to place them on a surface that's lined with a cloth. Remember, they will be very hot and you have to be very gentle. Sometimes when you take them out of the pot, you see some water on top of the lid. That's okay. You should still try to take them out of the pot as straight as you can. Don't tilt the jar. There's a lot of pressure that could have been built in there with the heat. So just take them out straight, and the jars are so hot that with time it will be easier for the water to evaporate. So just carefully place them all in a towel and wait for them to seal. Usually takes 12 to 24 hours. You just leave them in the calendar, and on the next day you can remove the bands and safely store them in your pantry as a shelf-stable item.